we are hanging our hat on. It's the ability to not only have validated, because that's also important. If you scale with something that's bad, you're scaling bad things.
Hey, we got Opt Inc. in the house. This is the unique situation. Mohsen, the founder, is here, but also you brought in your one of your advisors, UN, who's calling in from Boston. Glad to have both you guys on and talk a little more about something I've been really looking forward to with a neuroscience-based company. Mohsen, when we first talked, I talked to you like I explained to you that I did my undergrad in neuroscience, and I love nerding out about how the brain and how it works, and like the feedback loops that we have in our everyday life. And I love talking to companies who are working on optimizing ourselves and making ourselves better. So glad to have you on, Mohsen. What's going on?
Well, thank you very much for having us, and well. Glad to have somebody else from my background. So, just to give you a background about the company. So what we do is that we Opt is a digital mental health platform targeted at healthcare organizations and mental health care providers, and equip them with clinically validated digital care plans and proprietary AI algorithms to increase their personnel efficiency and care capacity by up to 4 times. And the way, the whole thing, I'm a medical doctor, and then I did the neuroscience, and now I'm working on a company. It's like a lot of people is like scratch their head, how did that get to here? So, when I graduated from medical school, I was really interested in understanding how the brain works and how its dysfunction, gives rise to different diseases. And that's why I started doing a PhD in neuroscience at Queen's University, and later I did a postdoc at Rutgers University on computational neuropsychiatry. And soon I became disillusioned that the brain is too complicated for us to have a grasp on it, in a meaningful way that we can actually develop something that works in the level of cells or networks the same way that the rest of the diseases and treatments are formed. On the other hand, my wife, she's a psychiatrist and assistant prof at Queen's University. Back in 2006, when we finished medical school, she started doing research in delivering psychotherapy online. And the backstory is we had a lot of friends who, left Iran to do a graduate study outside Iran, and starting a new a graduate program in a different country is stressful enough, and they didn't have access to much resources. And Nazanin at the time thought that, why wouldn't we provide care using the internet? Like, everybody has access to emails. And that is how she started doing research on delivering psychotherapy online. And so she would send the content, therapeutic content to the participants in her experiments using emails, and there were like a PowerPoint. Then there was a workbook. They did the workbook. They would email it back, and Nazanin would provide feedback. There would be multiple emails, exchanged, and actually worked really amazing, So she did a clinical trial looking at the efficacy in anxiety, depression, personality disorders. So by 2015, she had done like 5 clinical trials showing this actually works really well. And at that time, I told her like, what you do is amazing, but email is not the right medium. It's not, secure enough, not scalable or sustainable. So I suggested to make a platform that she can communicate securely with her patients online. And so it was really built for her. And so we have been working on that to, taking the bugs out. And in 2018, we actually won the Mental Health Innovation Zone Award in American Psychiatric Association meeting. And we felt that, well, it seems that this is getting advanced enough that we could make it commercially available to other care providers, like just like Nazanin, so they could use in their own practices. And that's when we, Opt got incorporated. And back in 2019, I felt that I have tried to go from the cellular side and circuit side, and but the solution, the really simple solution that my wife was using, is much more helpful than any incremental, kind of improvement that I could do, and thought, why not try to, combine that clinical expertise with my, scientific background on precise measurements and evidence-based decision making, to make a platform that essentially would, transform how we are practicing psychiatry and mental health care delivery.
Hmm. I mean, that was like it's a very elaborate kind of like way to start a company, because starting from a research perspective is always difficult, right? To commercialize, take a research perspective and commercialize into an operations perspective. Can you talk a little about that? Like, how do you take research, like something that's like very academic, and turn it into a company? Where does the cost benefit come from, right? How do you see that? Like, I got to form a company around this.
Well, to be fair, like I'm not a seasoned, executive, right? I had a vision, and I felt, this might be the way to do it, but there was no other way to do it, so I decided to do it myself, right? And I don't know whether that is good or bad. To be fair, I have learned a lot over the last 3-4 years, trying to make this as a business. You are really, at the beginning, you're naive. You think that, okay, if I have a good solution, naturally people would come around and adopt it, which cannot be farther from the truth, right? There are a lot of details in actually making an idea, or a simple a product into an actual business, and that is really where UN, came to, picture. And because I had some the research experience, expertise, and what I could do with making a product, but actually making a business, needs much more than that, and that's why I uh, um, I was lucky enough to have UN join our team, so we could take advantage of his
Yeah,
long 20 years of experience in healthcare to actually make this into a successful business.
definitely. UN, we got introduced over the call, our last call, and we didn't get much in the chance of introductions. Could you go over a little bit about yourself and your history? I think you froze right there a little bit. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I did freeze, and I apologize for the technical difficulties that I'm having. I thought this was behind me by getting a new router, but I guess not.
We were doing so good,
So
and then
I don't know
suddenly we had a
but
technical
I'm
issue. It's
having a
okay.
hard time.
Okay.
So okay, I'm back. It sounds like.
Yeah.
Let me dial back in a minute from my mobile phone. Okay.
Okay, hopefully that helps out. Okay, no problem.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, Mohsen, so speaking a little bit about that, so you said you have a medical background. You're a medical. You're a doctor,
Yep.
and you also have a PhD.
Yes.
Man, that's that's ambitious, right?
Well, studying and doing research was the thing that I could do best, and
Yeah.
that's I was hoping that to make a living out of that. We'll
Hmm.
see. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, the thought process of, going to all the way to med school and deciding instead of practicing, I want to go, do a PhD and become more academic focused. How did that kind of develop?
um, you know, uh, I don't know if it's good or bad. I'm somebody that gets bored doing the same thing again and again.
Mm-hmm.
So in the meta school, whenever we went to a new ward and we learned about a specific disease, the first 10 cases were like fantastic. It's so engaging thinking about it, how the physiology goes wrong and this gives to this rise to this disease or that disease and how you can fix it. So I was really interested in the pathophysiology of the diseases rather than practicing, medicine itself. And the way I felt is like actually, so I love pathophysiology of the disease. I love, you know, uh, finding a solution for it. I think the best way for me to go forward is to actually try to understand the pathophysiology, go inside that, go deeper, and no question is bigger than the brain itself, right? So that's how I got into it. But yeah, it turned out to
Hmm.
be too complicated. It's I don't see it being resolved, anytime soon and by
Can we
anytime
talk about the
soon.
complication? What part were you trying to focus on, one part of the brain, or are you trying to understand the brain works completely? Like, what was your
No, I
imperative?
mean, no, definitely I was, I did my PhD on motor control, and I did my postdoc in the uh, noradrenaline role of noradrenaline in the brain activity, and so the neuromodulators. The challenge is that uh, I feel. I mean, uh, this might be outside the scope, but
Of course.
the challenge is that for us, we are humans are really story oriented,
Hmm.
right? So the way we think about the stuff, there should be, a simple straight line, right? So we are really accustomed to linear studies and linear ideas. This is bad, this is good, this this causes cancer, this causes that. But the challenge is that if you go into further and further details, naturally those linear stories do not hold up anymore, and that is not that is what actually is the brain is about, right? I mean, it's the most complex structure there. You have I don't know how many different cell types. I think there are like maybe 100 of them. Even if that was not the case, you have like 10 different neuromodulators and neuropeptides and neurotransmitters. And when you put it all together, it becomes such a complex system, right? And you know, it is it's too much for us to understand. I personally do not believe we will ever have an uh, intuitive understanding of the brain, right?
Hmm.
Because our intuition, as I said, our intuition is pretty limited and linear. Now, trying to just imagining, a kind of a complex system, that's almost impossible, right? And but we could build other complex systems that could mimic and model the way the brain works. That is definitely doable. So I personally think that the way going forward in the neuroscience is actually the computational neuroscience and trying to bring different fields together to build a predictive model. Although we might not, at the end of the day, that model might become too complicated that we wouldn't understand that one either. But at the same time, we have enough control to make predictions. So uh, that is how I see it. And the best way, you could think of a complex system. Um, it's the example of a dual pendulum, right? A single pendulum is really straightforward. It goes, it resonates between two points. But as soon as you add another pendulum beneath that the first pendulum, the movement becomes chaotic. There is zero way that, there is no way you can predict how starting from the same point can actually go to follow up in the same pattern because it's a complex system. And just thinking about that, you realize that, okay, that is why we cannot come up with a straight answer. And to be fair, we don't have those straight answers in other field of medicine either. How many times have you read an article that vitamin C is helpful for cold and vitamin C is not helpful for cold? And that is not because some people are right and some people are wrong. It is simple that, you know, uh, all of us, go and start evaluating the stuff in a really controlled, limited situation, and then try to generalize it to whole, world, right? And so it's still, in that limited situation, their, kind of the conclusion probably is right, but that is the part that we generalize it to the rest of the states. That is where it all falls apart.
Mm. So, like, I would love to like nerd out more about that, more about the neuroscience with you, and
No.
I think we're going to. I think we're going to. But now that Yuen's joined us, Yuen, I wanted to
Hi.
get a little bit of your take of how you joined the firm and how you got involved. Can you talk a little bit about your background?
Absolutely, Ravi. So it is great to be on this call with you guys,
Yeah.
and we appreciate the opportunity. So my background is I have been in healthcare and healthcare related fields for over 30 years. I have managed operations in the larger organizations such as Bayer as well as United Health Group, and also have built startups from scratch, from startup. What Mohsen did and what interests me is really ability to be able to bring a solution for something that for the past 10, 15 years, I have been personally a believer that mental health is an issue and is a disease by itself. And I'm glad that the industry in the last 4 or 5 years has recognized that to be the case. So I saw an opportunity where there is a solution that is grounded on academic understanding and starts not from a technology point of view, but starts from understanding the clinical and the effect of the solution on both behavior as well as physical aspect of it, as well as is a solution that is can be scaled and expanded rapidly, right? So the challenge that we have and the behavioral healthcare challenges that they have, even before this pandemic that we're going through, is the fact that there is not enough resources available to address all the issues that are out there and all the people that are going through behavioral health, mental health issues. So being able to deliver a solution that expands that field of reach and it expands the efficacy of the solution and able to engage membership in that respect is important. That really goes back to my background. I've worked and helped organizations that have been in member engagement, clinical decision support, predictive modeling type of solutions, build and get into the market, both from, again, a larger corporation point of view, as well as startups that I've worked with and helped
Yeah.
bring up in that respect. So this is where that's how we met at one of the JP Morgan conferences that fully in healthcare constantly congregate, and I really liked what Mohsen was doing, and that's how we started connecting.
Yeah. So thinking about this industry is really picking up, right? Using neuroscience, understanding neuroscience to optimize people. Can you guys talk a little more about the platform, about what you hope to, like, how you hope to actually achieve results? I'm familiar with like cognitive behavioral therapy and like how that can help people, but how do you intend to do it as a platform?
Mohsen, you want to take that?
Oh, sure. Well, the idea is that cognitive behavioral therapy is really structured, right? I mean, when people think about therapy, a lot of people think of what is usually seen in the movies. Somebody is lying down on a bench and talking constantly. Well, that could be the case in talk therapy or something like that. But cognitive behavioral therapy is a really structured, solution. The idea is that how you understand the correlation between your situation, your thinking, and your emotions. And when you understand that relation, you can actually change how you feel. Like, let's say, you call one of your friends and they do not pick up. Okay, so the way you react to this simple action is completely related to how you feel and what you feel happen. If you know that your friend is usually not organized and they probably lost their phone, I mean, you wouldn't feel anything, right? I mean, it's like, okay. If you feel that they ignored you, that's why they didn't pick up the phone, you would feel angry or sad. And but if you feel maybe they are sick and that is why they couldn't pick up the phone, well, you would be worried and feel empathy for your friend. So you see, the same action of somebody not picking up the phone could completely evoke different feelings, um, you know, uh, based on how you think the underlying cause. And that is what exactly CBT is trying to do, is to try to teach you, how you can break each event and stuff happening around you into those elemental parts, and how you can actually try to, using more of the cognitive thinking, try to come out with a different feeling than what you usually feel. Uh, so, uh, so it is a really structured and a really effective solution. Actually, it's considered the gold standard of care for mood and anxiety disorders, which are like 65% of mental health problems. And so even if you go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist for receiving CBT therapy, like 2/3 of the time is spent by that therapist or that psychiatrist talking to you and teaching you techniques, right? Which is the same for me, for you, or for you, and for anybody else. But you really don't need the time of a specialist time to be spent repeating the general concepts that is not personalized to me, to be repeated multiple times. So that is how we thought that we can actually bring it down. I mean, we have been working on remote learning and
Yeah.
all those stuff for so long. Is that okay? Why couldn't we just bring down all those generalized concepts into some pre-designed learning modules that the patients can learn on their own time? I mean, they wouldn't need to be a real time. They could take as much time to understand the concepts or go review it or anything, something that is not possible in a real time. In a real time, the clinician is talking and you should be processing at the same time. But now you have the time. And in our system, at the end of each module, there is a homework that tests you, to ask you to try to practice what you learned in that module. And the clinicians only provide personalized feedback to that homework, right? This way, they're not repeating, the same general concepts across multiple patients, and just providing, we are just using the clinicians for the personal response, that personalized part of their feedback, which is the essential part that nobody can, the
Yeah.
computer cannot do. So this way, a clinician using our platform, they can handle like 3 or 4 patients in 1 hour rather than just one patient, which might take 1 hour to an hour and a
Yeah,
half.
yeah. And on the flip side, for the patient, it'd be much cheaper because you're not
Oh yeah.
spending for like a full hour with that therapist anymore and paying for the hourly rate. I mean, that's so smart, right? That's so interesting. Like we don't think about, especially like these high performing, like high, like high professionals, like therapists and learned individuals doing like this cycling gig, or like they're teaching the same thing over and over to the same clients, right? Um, are you familiar enough to talk about exactly what is like copy and paste? Like what is like universal to people? What are these exact modules that people are taught?
So we have
Can you
a
give an
range of
example?
yeah.
Yeah.
So we have a range of modules. We have a module for anxiety. We have module for depression. We have module for personality disorders. We have module for COVID, which we actually started building from ground up in
Hmm.
May. So the idea was that again how you can build resilience, and how you can deal with situations that might happen during COVID, right? You'd like if you lost your work, it is nothing to do with your self-worth, right? It's a pandemic, people are being laid off. You might be one of them, but it doesn't mean you're worthless or useless or something like that,
Mm.
right? Or, not every time that somebody coughs during the pandemic, they have COVID. They might have simply a seasonal allergy, right? So
Yeah.
these are stuff that when you talk about it and give examples about them, people can really sit with them, and also some solutions on how to deal with situations. Like breathing techniques. That okay, when you feel really anxious about something, how can you manage that? So those are some of the concepts that we try to cover in the modules. But I would also like to talk a little about the AI part of it, right?
Yeah.
So we talked about, now we are in the digital realm. And as I mentioned, we are trying to make sure that the clinicians are we are using the clinicians' time only for the part that matter, and we cannot do it, statically or dynamically. And there is a lot of, we know that Amazon knows, what we like to buy, and they show us the same, advertisement and anything, and that is because there are a lot of information in our behaviors, right? Well, there's no reason that information cannot be used for something better, like therapy.
Hmm.
So the way we see it is that there is lots of information in the way we walk, in the way we talk, in the tone of our voice, or the way we use language, which we call it at this point. I mean, we not. It's generally called behavioral phenotyping. It's how we can measure behavior in a way that we can the same way that we measure red blood cells or white blood cells, So bringing the behavior into a realm of measurement.
Hmm.
So we have been working on using natural language processing. So
Hmm.
each week, our clients write 1 to 2 pages, right? And we have homework from session 1, session 2, session 3, session 4, and so forth. And we know that what was the module that they went and did the homework. So we have a spectrum of writing, so we can look how did the writing change from session 1 to session 12, right? What was the kind of words that were used mostly in session 1, again, versus those used in session 12. What was the structure of the language? How much they talked about their symptoms in the first module and the last module, and that gives us some clues that okay, now if I get a text.
Yeah, sorry about that. That was on.
No,
yeah, go ahead.
Now if we get a text and read something, can we now predict a patient's mental status, right, based on that only given sentence? Because now we can compare this, okay, the number of percentage of time this person is talking about their symptoms is lower, so it's probably they have less problem or more problem. That's just really just a simplistic example of how we do it. And that is what we have been doing over the last year. What we are doing this year is integrating wearable information. So again, if you go to a clinician, and if for depression and anxiety, some of the questions they ask is that, how is your sleep changed, right? How is your appetite changed? Have you lost weight or have you gained weight? And these were really, kind of qualitative measures. My sleep is better or worse. But we nowadays, every day have something everybody has something on their hand that gives you the exact number of, hours. When did they go to sleep? When did they wake up? How long was the deepest sleep? So it would be crazy not to use that information, that detailed information for clinical purposes, and still, rely on the person, judging, oh, my activity is low or less, or my sleep is good or bad. So that is the second thing that we are incorporating in our platform.
Mm-hmm. Over last year, I started using a wearable called Whoop. Right, like Whoop is like a very high-end Fitbit. It's meant for it's meant initially for athletes and for high performers. Now it's more commercially, it's aimed more for commercial applications. So I got it just to get some information, and it gave so much insights onto my body type. It was measuring mostly my heart rate, but it measured something called heart rate variability. Right, by knowing how different the heart rate is throughout the day, it gives you a baseline of how variable it can become. And that measure can indicate the level of anxiety your body is going through, how much it handles, how well you're sleeping versus not sleeping. And the app was very intuitive. Like when I go to sleep, it notices the sense in that and logs right away. Like this is the time you're sleeping this time, and all you do is wake up next day and confirm it. And it tells you how well you slept, how much you moved, right? Like your REM sleeps versus your non-REM cycles, all from a wristband, right? So yeah. So is there like a need for like a wearable, or can you just use your phone, integrate it to your system that can measure things like for us automatically, so less inputs?
So I have a soapbox is ready for that. So the idea is that yes and no. I mean, the answer is that you know there are different diseases that we can evaluate and stuff like if you have diabetes, the question is you want to know the patient to know their blood glucose, right? Now you can have 10 different ways of evaluating your blood glucose. It could be a prick in the blood, or it could be through the skin or something, a patch attached here. The challenge with mental health is that there is no single variable that we could say this is what really decides what if some person's mental health is good or bad, right? And so while those each piece of information is correlative, right? There are groups that are working on the tone of voice. You might have seen Amazon has this variable that listens to your tone of voice and gives you a report. There are groups that are actually just looking at the pattern of your cell phone use, right? There is this company called MindStrong that they have looked at, how that, and the most indicative of someone's mental status was how regularly they charge their cell phone.
Sorry, my turn.
Right on cue.
Yeah,
My turn to.
yeah. So how regularly they charge their cell phone or stuff like that. But the challenge is that no single one variable would be the silver bullet. You would need a big data of all these different behavioral phenotyping. The sleep, the pattern of activity, your pattern of word usage, uh, a big range of activities needs to be integrated for this data before they become really helpful in managing mental status.
Hmm. Cool. UN, maybe you can chime in here about like the more the business side of this industry, right? Now, like, we are hearing a lot about, the issues with sleep and people not sleeping enough, anxiety and depression going up and up, especially amongst the youth and stuff. What is happening from the industry's point of perspective? What are the changes that are happening?
Well, it's a very good question. Thanks for asking that. In my opinion, the silver lining of the pandemic has been a wake-up call for all of us, right?
Mm,
So it's been up to very recently, many of the people that even had the solutions and capabilities to deliver were basically brushed aside for more of a traditional approach to dealing with behavioral health and people who have that issue. What happened in the last 1 year is so unfortunate for all of us, right? But at the same time, it gave us the ability to really understand that there are ways to look outside of the box and really approach that. And that's where I see the market. Your question is really what is happening in that. I see a lot of activities in that, a lot of opportunities for organizations to be able to take charge as I'm sure you see it, and we see it in both U.S. and Canada. The behavioral health in the whole area of the digital health really bubbled up right up to the surface, right? So it became to be perhaps one of the most noticeable challenges that not only they have to deal with during this pandemic, but is for here to stay for a long period of time
mm,
after. A lot of other things, for example, the what they call the second wave, which was essentially those people who didn't get their typical care during the pandemic, that are at risk, they will go back at risk. So this would be, they will have that under control soon or within some months after. Whereas this behavioral health is really it's called the fourth wave, is one that not only is going to stay with us for a long time, but it will carry on. A good example that Mohsen brings up with the hurricane that we had in Louisiana, for 5 years after, the use of alcohol was up 140%
mm,
versus before. So that type of trend is really alarming and something that we're hoping to be able to help curve it and be able to help understand and deliver the solutions that people need in that respect. But for those younger people, and talking from the experience of people around me, not being able, the anxiety that sits with the adolescents and younger people for not being able to be at school, not be able to do things that they would do, or attend the prompts that they would do. That's real. That's something that
mm.
we need to work with, and we need to understand, and we need to put resources behind it to manage it. And that's where the challenge of resource versus functionality becomes to be an issue, right? So if
Yeah.
there are not enough resources, how do you deliver that solution to them and use the resources at the top of their practice, essentially practicing at the top of their license, essentially.
Hmm.
Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
No, absolutely. And I think those are all valid points, and I think it needs to be addressed moving forward. I think the post-pandemic world is going to show us really the resiliency of our society, right? Where we have bounced back, we have commercialized a lot of solutions in these gap years, right? Where we're living in a completely different reality, right? And I think we're going to see, like, I think it's really like a testing ground, I guess, for what the future can become, right? Because everything's so compressed here. Like we feel everything more because we're all like, there's like there's billions of people all experiencing the same reality at the same time, and yet it's different from what's normal, right? So everything's kind of magnified. So, but I think the main issue with this is it's going to be the lack of empathy, because
Right.
a lot of people are stuck at home, and if they're good, they don't necessarily going to see other people who are doing worse than them, right? Like, yeah, we have social media and stuff like that, but not everyone posts all the negatives, right? So the difference between people who are like, you're no longer traveling on public roads, you're no longer been traveling much on like the, public transit, right? You're not running into people of different social statuses, social backgrounds. You're not going to notice people who might be suffering or going through things. So the struggle now is where people are going to lose empathy for people who are not doing well, right? But the pro point is that solutions like yours could lower the barrier of entry. One, make it cheaper but more accessible, and allow for more data to be collected to allow for more proactive treatments from a wider scope, right?
Ab- Absolutely, you're absolutely right. That scalability is really the one thing that we are hanging our hat on. It's
Mm,
the ability to not only have validated, because that's also important. If you scale with something that's bad, you're scaling bad things
mm,
in it and growing something that is not effective, right? But
yeah.
if you're scaling something that is already proven to be validated, clinically validated, and effective, that's where that's where the rubber meets the road. Is doing the right things and expanding on those right things, and that's where our mission is, to really be able to deliver on that basis of understanding the effectiveness of our solution, but delivering the productivity that is measurable. That's the most important thing, because if you cannot measure, then you cannot win in this world, right?
Mm,
Measurable and also replicable.
mm, yeah. Yeah. Mohsen, flipping back to a neuroscience question. Um, have like in your drive to understand this problem and drive it forward, how much with it clinically or off channel, how much time and effort have you put into like researching like consciousness, like the origin of consciousness? I think that's one of the most fundamental problems about neuroscience and psychology, right? They call it the hard problem, understanding where all this comes from, right? So we know the underlying processes of how anxiety works or depression come from, but from a top-down perspective, from how we experience reality to how that affects our biology, we're still trying to understand that. Do you have any thoughts?
Well, challenge, first, no. The reason is that, UN mentioned it. It's really hard to evaluate those questions because it's really hard to measure those questions, right? So what I have been trying to do, like in motor control, is like how does the activity of the motor cortex or sensory cortex changes, when the body is making a specific move,
Mm,
or looking at the activity of this small locus that generates the norepinephrine through the whole brain. And really, the challenge is that we cannot even understand the brain at those levels, let
mm,
alone going into that much deeper, kind of epiphenomena of what is happening underneath, right?
mhm,
So it's like that's the biggest challenge. We cannot have a good model of the circuitry and and how the brain works. And now, before going to the next level to make those ask those harder questions.
yeah. It's something I've been following really like since I was younger. In my undergrad, I ran across something called the Penrose papers by Roger Penrose, Doctor. sorry, Sir Roger Penrose. Now he got knighted. He wrote this like mathematical quantitative proof on how consciousness could erupt from the quantum realm, right? And it's very theoretical. It's very like mind bending. It's passed around a lot of thinkers, and it opened up this idea of like we're so like far away from understanding the process of the brain, right? There's a institute in California called the Singularity Institute, right? The singularity being when AI, AI and machines can get to this point, a singularity where it can become smarter than humans, right? And they think of it as a computational problem, where it becomes if you can increase the computational capability of machines, they can match the computational ability of the human brain, and therefore you can download consciousness and operate it on a virtual realm. The problem with that thinking is that we don't really understand the brain enough to understand how to even mechanize it, how to replicate it, right? And there's so much research and thinking behind that. So thank you for going and alluding to that. Going back to your research, especially with blending, neuroscience research with AI and intelligence, right? Recently, I've been following a lot of work of the historian Yuval Harari. Are you familiar with him? Yuval, he's gotten famous for his book *Sapiens* and *Homo Deus*, the evolution of humanity. But his thinking really is it's a very a dystopian kind of thinking towards where what happens when medical technologies kind of blends with AI, right? Biotech and AI kind of come together, where machines can eventually software can know us better than we do, right? And the interplay what's going to happen there. So like one of the problems right now is that social media sites with their billions of dollars of valuations is really the leaders in thought when it comes to how anxiety and machines kind of interrelate, right? For instance, like Facebook got in a lot of hot water a few years ago for running social experiments on whether they can see if just by influencing what content you see, if they can influence your moods, right? And they're proven they can do this, right? So now that that algorithms can control us on a very massive level, and maybe even an interscopic level individually, it calls into a lot of questions about the interplay between our society, right? Who's really the master and who's really the operator, right? And what I love about your kind of technology is that, yeah, it helps people get more support and help, but what does the future of this look like, right? Like, is it become more of like an intuitive thing, like a plugin on your device that's just like working with different multiple things? Like, how can this technology move into the future and become more like effortlessly in tune with us to make us better, make us understand, and qualitatively make us like more conscious of the things that's working against us?
Well, I mean, the technology has always had that effect that you can do better and you
Yeah.
could force as well, right? Uh, and that is why we need ethics studies on this.
Hmm.
Exactly. Uh, you know, if we are relegating the decision to a machine, how that machine should make decisions, uh, I'm not that much worried about that. I'm sure as this becomes more and more advanced, we will, uh, come up with, ethical solutions. It is the same thing about genetic, interventions and any other kind of technology, but what I'm worried about is the gap. I'm not that
Mm.
much worried about what happens when machine overtake us. I'm more worried about what happens to the time that a part of the society can take advantage of the machine, but another part cannot, right?
Mm.
And you have seen that in a lot of studies, and that they talk about this, that a lot of these technologies like face recognition technologies work less effective on the the colored faces than the white faces, right?
Mhm.
And also the other part is that what happens when we bring our own biases to the machine. The machine is like at the end of the day learning, right? The challenge is again how and who is influencing those machines, and that is something that we should really be thinking about and have fields of science actually looking at it to come up with actual solutions.
Yeah, yeah. I like how you brought in the ethics behind that. I think that's become a very telltale signs of our age. Is now we're looking into the ethics of exactly what you said, like who's behind the algorithms, who's deciding, who gets to decide what's right and wrong, what to do, right? And the forefront of this is like the machine learning software behind autonomous driving, right? The classic problem, right? If you have a
Yeah,
driver and something happens in front of you, does the car swerve and hit a pedestrian, or does
yeah,
it go off the bridge and kill the driver? Who like how does it make those decisions? How does it play that, right?
yeah,
And someone's got to input these kind of things. So the ethics behind this is, for hundreds of years it was theoretical. What would happen is this. Now it's applicable, right? Now we had to like tell another intelligence how to operate. So I think we're like that's a really interesting age we're living in, right?
it is. It is.
Yeah, so let's tying back to being a startup, being a founder, right? I want to approach this, right. You went from a classical, more academic, from an academic practice now to a commercializing a technology, right? And developing technology. Was there a learning curve in building this platform and
Oh,
understanding the software, understanding how things work?
definitely, definitely. And again, well, the biggest learning curve was the part that I didn't know at all, right?
Mm,
Technology I was familiar with. Definitely, it is everything is more complicated than it looks like, right? So the technology was not an exception. But there are so much intricacies about there are stuff that you cannot even think of, right? I mean,
mm.
if you are thinking about making a startup, you don't think about uh, accountants and lawyers, but those are the ones that actually you would need them from day one, and those are the ones that are most of the time have would be the biggest cost for you and your kind of enterprise. So there's definitely a lot of challenges, and growing a team, going from 1 and 2% to like 10%, right? And as an academic, you're not really trained how to manage a group, right? I mean, it's like mostly you do your research, and to be fair, that's sometimes the problem with a lot of the labs as well, that the principal investigator doesn't really know how to manage groups. Uh, and how to structure what is a good structure, is like a lot of times, if you look at my desktop, there are files all over my desktop. And you when you started a startup, you tend to work with it just the same way. You put this document there and that document there, but you soon realize that this is not sustainable. And again, that is exactly why I asked a veteran like UN to join us and help us with the commercial structuring and all those different minutiae that I had no idea about. And yeah, I mean, how you take an idea, now you have a product, how you actually take it to the market and sell it. I was like, I never sold anything in my life, right, to anybody. And so how would you do it, and how would you talk about something, in science, you are are really really cautioned against talking too grandiose about anything, and you learn to be as precise as possible, not to overgeneralize or this and that, but then you come and try to have that attitude, and you soon realize that that's actually not an attribute that works. I remember one day that I was completely shocked that we were talking to a potential investor, and at the end of our the presentation, he told me, like, you obviously know what you're doing, but you don't come across as a car salesman. And I always thought that that is a good thing, but he was actually talking about it in a negative thing, that it don't look like somebody that actually can sell this. And so um, but as an investor, my bottom line is, making my money, double my money or something like that. So if I don't trust you to be the salesman, why would I invest in you? So it needs a team, it needs a village, to really, make this a successful. And to be fair, I mean, we had some success, but we are not yet an IPO, so we might still be doing something wrong, and 2 years down the road we fail. Who knows? But I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot, and definitely, I learned a lot from people who were, selflessly, present. Like, as I said, uh, I met UN uh, by complete fluke in a meeting, and he was so nice to share his expertise and knowledge and provide feedback to me. And he's not alone. I've received over the last 3 4 years. I've had received consultations from advisors, all sort of advisors, and well, that is what it takes to actually take a make a technology and bring it to commercialize it.
Definitely. I believe it takes a community to raise a startup.
Oh, exactly,
All
exactly.
right. And I mean, what you described right there, I think that's such a classic problem, right? Like when someone develops a problem, you think of entrepreneurs are people who just magically just devise these things, but people who are like chasing these problems, I feel like I find the most interesting ones are the people who are coming from a very specialized field, who have done years of research or years of professional experience or working in a field, who then dive and find a very unique niche problem that has a wide applications but needs to be solved and can double down on it. In the case of yourself, taking this neuroscience capability, this strategic blank that's operating in therapies and trying to figure out how to automate that away and make it more accessible to everybody else. And that's such a that requires a deep level of knowledge and understanding, right, to implement. But then to complement that, you're going to need somebody with the business skills to develop this, right? I mean, one of the most the benefiting part of the innovation ecosystem, innovation industry, is that yeah, there's a lot of money to be made if you can do this well and operate it. But the problems of it is a launch capability, right? It's like you want to solve this problem, cool. You got to figure out your accounting, you got to figure out your legal, you got to figure out how to structure this, how to lead people, to hire people, the HR, the compliance, right? There's a whole bunch of operational knowledge you need to go out and solve the problem that you actually want to solve, right?
Exactly.
So UN, maybe we can jump. You can jump in here. Can you talk? And we'll end here with this kind of acknowledgement. What is the what does it take to find a especially something like this, like a commercially research application that comes out, and how figure out how to commercialize it? What are the problem sets? What are the strategies you implement? How do you go about doing that?
And that's a very good question. And first of all, my hat is off to Mohsen because one of the things he realized, which most startup founders have a hard time to realize, is the fact that he needs help. He needs other people that are better than him in other areas. Not everybody can be an expert. The challenge I see, and I've seen that a number of times in the market, that a lot of founders, they believe that they can do everything themselves. They understand the technology, they understand everything, and they feel as they can also manage and run the other parts of it as themselves. Very rarely those people are actually are capable of doing that. So the village, the community, putting that whole thing together in a way that works together well, and picking the right people to bring in that are on fundamentally on the are on the same path and at the same goal. Having someone who has the same vision is a very important thing in that respect. Finding those people are probably one of the toughest things, And that's the one thing that I truly believe that we are doing, Opt is doing well, is not essentially bringing everybody in, but bringing those people who have the right vision and the right and address the right resources in there.
Mm.
The challenges of the startups is exactly what you mentioned, right? Is all of the above. Is really how do I take the trash out and at the same time get on a call and be the president of the company and show myself as president of the company in that respect. And the most important thing that perhaps I can offer as the advice to those who are startups is have a plan, right?
Mm.
Have a vision, have a mission, know exactly what you want to do, where you want to go, and make sure that people that are on board with you are also following and understand that vision and mission and are buying into it. Because otherwise, if they are all doing different things, just imagine different people going different ways. It's just not going to come together.
Hmm. That's great. That's a great sentiment. Definitely seek help where you need help. It takes a
Mm-hmm.
community to raise a startup. Thank you both for coming on. It's been an hour. It's been a pleasure to have you, both of you on. Really love the applications of what you're talking about, especially about getting therapy to more people at a more cost-effective way, in a more accessible way, more universal way. Really wish you guys the best of luck. Thank you for coming on, guys. It's
Thank
been
you
a
so
pleasure.
much.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.